Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Tea Time with Elsa. I am out here on a beautiful fall day. I have the horses behind me, Myrna and Cleo, and there's Candu. I'm in Candu's side of the paddock today. Just thought I would change it up. And today, I've been thinking about this a lot. And that is all of the really challenging stuff in horse training. It's interesting, I do freedom-based training, which means that most of what I do is pretty easy. It's actually not that challenging, it's just slow. And the challenge is to breathe and become patient with the slow pace of development. But I think that I need to acknowledge that there are a lot of hard, difficult, challenging things that come up in relationships with horses. Hi, Teza. Hi, Florentine. Welcome to tea time. So, this herd here, Myrna, Cleo, Candu, they're pretty settled. We have a really good situation for them. They're safe, they're happy, they have companions. There's not a lot challenging right here, but there is a lot that's difficult and challenging in horse training. And I shy away from it a lot because it's most of what horse trainers talk about. How do we fix the problems? This is the thing the horse is doing wrong. How do we fix it? How do we change it? And I usually sort of stay away from that topic because I say if it's too difficult or too challenging, it just means you did too much too soon. And anytime you do too much too soon, you're gonna trigger fight, flight, or freeze from the horse. And yeah, Rebecca, I think you and I can feel this one particularly. I had a really good breakthrough this week. I'm pleased to announce that Atlas has actually worn a halter twice this week. And this is a really big deal. I think it's been about 3 months since I thought he was ready to work with the rope and the halter. Now, I don't usually work with tools except for safety. And I really believe if I'm gonna own stallions, I need to be sure that someone can put a halter on them and get them to safety. If they were to ever escape my fences, if they were ever to get free, someone can put a halter on them and bring them home again, bring them to safety. So having an unhalter trained stallion feels very irresponsible to me. I love training without tools. I'm gonna train without tools. That's still my passion. But to have a stallion means they need to be able to wear a halter and they need to know how to lead. Unfortunately, Atlas has had a lot of bad history with ropes and halters. So about 3 months ago, I thought he was ready. And I started working with a rope and he was doing really well. I thought he was doing really well. And then his muscles started to spasm uncontrollably anytime I approached him. So I could see the muscles fire in his neck and they would have a tick to them and they would just spasm. And when his muscle spasms happened, he would start getting really angry, which I can understand. It's hard to be that out of control. And I realized it was the work with the rope. Look at my brain messing my words up here. It was the work with the rope that was triggering Atlas to feel very out of control. And I kept doing it anyway because I thought he could handle it. And this is the thing, you do too much too soon for the horse, you're gonna get fight, flight, or freeze. Now, Atlas has a lot of freeze anyway, so I kind of work through that. That's sort of normal for him. But there's not a lot of fight and flight usually because I stay under the threshold of triggering those things. Well, one night I was working with the rope and I brought it up the side of his neck and he got really big and then he went to slam his whole body down on top of me. And he didn't. He pulled the punch. He came in my direction and then he stopped himself. But he really scared me. And when that happened, it was a really clear signal to me that I had done too much too soon for Atlas. And that was hard for me. As a trainer, I'm supposed to know better. I'm supposed to read him. I'm supposed to not put him in a situation where he has to fight back like that. But I didn't. And it was really emotional for me. It was really challenging. It was scary. I put the ropes away. We didn't do any more ropes. And it was time for me to figure out there's this big thing that we need to get done, but I'd done too much too soon, and I'd put both Atlas and I in a really dangerous situation. How do you navigate that? It happens sometimes. Oh, John, I'm sorry. You've got a still photo, no audio or video feed. Okay, you may have to watch the replay. I will, hopefully everybody else is having an okay time hearing me. It's the thing about technology. We love it, but it's frustrating when it doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to. So I had that really difficult time with Atlas where he was trying to work with me, but it was too much for him. And when it was too much for him, he was overwhelmed. And it got really challenging and it got scary. So the thing that I tell everyone is when you hit a challenge or a problem, you have to think about what is adjacent to that problem. What is next to that problem? Because that problem's too big. It's too big for you and the horse at that time. And if you can't come directly in and solve that problem, you have to figure out how to come in the side door. You have to figure out what is next to that problem that's a little bit challenging, but manageable. And so Atlas and I had to retreat back, and it actually took us a couple of months to get rid of the muscle spasms that happened every time I touched him. And that was heartbreaking. So, you take the time it takes, and I put away the ropes. We didn't do any more rope work, and we just worked with my hands, and we worked at the different distances to and from Atlas, and we tried to develop confidence in all of the stuff around the problem. The problem was the ropes. Atlas is afraid of the ropes. And he has an interesting thing where he looks like he's doing really well. He puts on a brave face. And then after he puts on that brave face, things start to go really, really wrong. And I didn't know how to read that. So fast forward several months, I've done hours and hours and hours and hours of work. And ultimately I realized Atlas is very difficult for me to read. He freezes up a lot. And even if he is thinking, sometimes he gets stuck in one thinking category. And so because he's stuck in one thinking category, he's just not getting the stress relief that he needs to from thinking. And I found that when we started doing more exercise, so I built him a track. He has a big, huge track paddock where he can get a lot more exercise around the pasture. Instead of having just an open pasture, he has a track pasture. I set up a lot of things so that he had more movement in his life. And I did use a little bit of dominance to help him get more movement in his life. And what I found is when he had more movement, I could read him better. So if I skipped a couple of days and I got busy, I was really likely to make a mistake where I thought he was okay, and then I did too much of something too soon. And, oh shoot, Rachel Marie's having a tough time, actually. Kathy, yes, you are watching me from the UK. So it sounds like some people are having a tough time watching this and some people are still getting it. So I'm just going to keep going for now. For those of you who are missing it, I hope you get the replay a little bit later. So I had another huge problem, which some of you guys may have read about with Ocasio, my youngster. And when Ocasio went through all my fences and broke down fences and had his huge emotional upheaval, I lost a lot of confidence in myself. And when I lost confidence, I didn't want to do anything difficult anymore. So I started really retreating back into my comfort zone and being very, very, very careful, only doing things that I could succeed in. And it took me about a month after Ocasio's accident before I really started to feel brave enough to try things again. And I bring this up because I think that as horse trainers, we're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to know what we're doing. We're supposed to do it right all the time. And we're not. We're problem solving, just like you guys are. And when we do too much too soon, we're going to trigger fight or flight. And then we're going to beat ourselves up. We're going to be, or at least in my case, I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be ashamed that I didn't know better. And then I've got to work through all of that. And I guess the point that I wanted to make today is that is normal. That happens. Wouldn't it be great if we could avoid it? Yes, but there's a thing about when you do too much and you make a mistake, you have to come up with solutions you never would have thought of before if you had never made the mistake. And that is valuable. So Atlas is a real internal processor. And what I find is when they get more movement, they start communicating better. So instead of going from no communication to freaking out, when they have more movement in their life, what happens is they start getting better at communicating when something is a little too much instead of waiting to communicate when it's way too much. So movement really helps with that. I prefer not to force movement to happen, but generally speaking, I find the more still a horse is in their life, the harder they get to read. Like, you don't know when you're getting it right and you don't know when you're getting it wrong. And that's really frustrating because we want to get it right. We don't want to do too much too soon. So when we get in this place where we've done too much, we've put a horse in a bad situation, they had some sort of an explosion, we feel terrible, this lights a bit of a fire inside of us to figure out things that we might not have to figure out otherwise. And I don't want to say it's necessary, but what I am going to say is it speeds the process up. So when you make a big mistake, you actually end up learning things faster. And I'm not saying you wouldn't learn the same things over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 years, because I think that we are learners. We are always learning. But the thing is, we're learning at a pace that's very slow, and it almost doesn't seem like anything's happening. And we don't realize how much we're learning slowly over time. The beauty of making a really big mistake and putting yourself in a really challenging situation where life is really hard for a little while is your brain becomes much more active in figuring out how to solve that problem. So, don't be afraid of the hard stuff. When you find you've gotten yourself in too deep, things go all wrong, just figure out which problems are beside the big problem, which problems are close to it but are manageable. Go back to the small stuff. The last month, I really went back to the small stuff. I played it really safe. I did stuff that was really easy, and I got my confidence back. And then once my confidence was back, I was able to go get the halter and say, Atlas, I think you're ready now. And I've been able to put the halter on and take it off of him. There's no muscle spasms anymore. He's not getting upset. It doesn't feel unsafe. And so it works. It's okay to have everything blow up in your face. It's okay if it gets really hard, because your brain will be triggered to figure things out faster. It's not comfortable. That thing they say about If you're comfortable, you're not learning. I totally disagree with that. You are always learning. You're just learning slowly. If you're comfortable, you are learning very slowly. If you are uncomfortable, you start learning faster. So I see I've got a bunch of comments here. I'm going to see what I've missed. Beth says, oh my God, it sounds just like a complicated little mare I'm working with at the moment. Everyone said she's dangerous, but people just weren't reading her. She's so hard to read, internal processor. You've said exactly what I needed to hear. Good, I'm glad. And that's what it is. If we can read them, we know how to slice it up and make training uncomplicated. Make it small enough pieces that nobody feels overwhelmed. But when we can't read them, it gets really hard and we make mistakes. But when we make mistakes, we start coming up with solutions and our brain starts working a little harder. So I'm glad you agree, Florentine and Christelle. Kristen says, it's about the many small details, not the big picture. Yep. Rebecca says, totally. When you learn to lean into the discomfort of mistakes, you find you can overcome the next one more easily. Yep. And Rebecca Harris says, thank you. I made a mistake with my new horse, but found a little path through and so pleased to be learning through it. Love your perspective. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, Christian, it is really great to share about Atlas. I was really stuck and really frustrated, and I didn't really want to talk about it because I feel very irresponsible having a stallion that's not halter trained yet. But because he had a tendency to attack people, it didn't feel like I could rush the halter training. I really had to take it at his pace. And so I really had to think about what are all the problems next to the problem about halter training. What are all the things that I can solve that's not directly about halter training, but is going to support halter training when we get back to it? And this week, we got back to it. And I feel really, really good about it. Yes, I do wish that I hadn't done too much too soon. Yes, I wish that I'd never put myself in a situation where Atlas threatened me. But at the same time, I feel like I know him better because of it. I feel like I understand him and his process and who he is better because of all the little problems I had to sort through to get back to the halter successfully. So, thank you, Michelle. It's good stuff. And I just want to encourage you guys, if it gets really challenging and really hard, it just means you did too much too soon. That's all. And it's okay. You're going to go back and you're going to figure out which pieces are solvable. Bite off smaller bits that you can actually chew. And there are going to be some emotions that go with that. Some frustration, some depression, some, at least if you're me. And when you work through all those emotions and you just keep solving the next small problem, you learn so much from leaning into your mistakes. It really is okay. So, let's see, I missed here. Lisa says, I have so much respect for you sharing the ups and downs, sharing the moments that have been very valuable to watch. Both this talk and the movie Taming Wild with the geldings. Big valued moments that have been helping me when I've been stuck. So thank you for sharing. You're welcome. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about my trip across Costa Rica and the geldings that we worked with then. And, you know, that was when I made a lot of mistakes because we had a certain destination we had to get to every day and we had a lot to get done. So there were a lot of situations where I did too much too soon. And I really had to struggle through the emotions of that. For those of you who've seen the movie, you see me crying. Believe me, I cried more than what was caught on film. But when you struggle through that and you lean into the mistakes you've made, you learn so fast. And I'm not saying we have to learn fast. Sometimes it's really nice to just learn slow. You know, take a small piece at a time, no angst, no chaos. Just learn a little bit at a time. That's my preference. But if we get delivered a really big challenge, just lean into it. it will pave the way for so much good stuff. Teza says, this is so good. I was stuck because Lena was accepting me handling her front feet, but not really comfortable enough with me in that position. She accepts it, but isn't comfortable enough. I have to go back to square one, get the deep comfort of me being beside her in the pasture. Back to improving square one. Yes, that's exactly it. We get stuck on this thing where we go, I've almost got it, but I don't. And the horse keeps saying, that's just too much too soon. And we have to go to scale it back. What's the piece beside it? What's the piece before it? How do we strengthen all of the skills around it until we can get back to that thing that feels really important or really challenging or really daunting or impossible in some cases? Just keep working the problems around it. Rachel says, I need to hear this. It's hard when things go wrong. I beat myself up. But you're right. Just lean into it. Learn the lesson. Yeah. I believe in slow learning, Rachel. I think it's peaceful and it's beautiful. And who says we need to learn fast? But when we make a mistake, learning is sped up. And there is also a beauty to that. So Julia says, love your honesty and humility. Find it very inspiring. That's great saying. If you find a big challenge, just lean into it. Yeah. Yeah, and Joanne, I do appreciate the slow. I would love it if I was such a good trainer that I never made a mistake. Wouldn't that be fabulous? But I live in the real world. And in the real world, I'm going to do too much too soon sometimes. And then I'm going to lean into it. And I'm going to try and figure out all the problems around that problem. What are the smaller problems? The bigger one's too big. How do I support the things before it, around it, beside it? And then the emotions that I feel, the angst I feel about my mistake, tend to really feed my solution finding. I get much better at finding solutions when I have a little intensity behind it because I made a mistake. So I'm going to leave you guys with those thoughts for today. Thank you for joining me for tea time. If you ever have any topics you want me to touch on, let me know. I'll write them down on my list. I try and pick something that is kind of applicable to what I'm living right now, but sometimes I'm a little stuck and I really love going to my list and going, oh yeah, that is a great idea. And I have a story that goes with that. So thank you. Yeah, Rebecca, that pesky big red button. We feel like we have to press it. You know, what happens if I try this? And you think maybe it's too much, maybe it's not. I just got to push it and see. And then life gets exciting. And then when it's exciting, we have to figure out, is this exciting in a good way? Or did I just push a button that exploded everything in my face and ruined some trust? And that's okay if that happens. I mean, we don't want to make a habit of it, but it is going to make us think so much faster and clearer and stronger about how we solve that, whatever it is that we messed up. Donnelly says, would you describe what it looks like to lean into it? For me, when I lean into a problem, this is literally how I do it, is before I go to sleep at night, I will think about the thing I did wrong and everything wrong about it. And then I will go to sleep and I'll sleep on it. And in the morning, I will try not to think about the problem, but I'll try and think about all the little things around it. So for instance, with Atlas and the halter, I really needed him to get more comfortable being touched around his eye. And I realized the space away from his eye was actually a lot more difficult than right next to his eye. So this was really difficult. But the fact is, this wasn't that great either. So before I started pushing him to get used to this, I had to make sure that he started to enjoy this. And we rested there and enjoyed that and came back and enjoyed this and rested there and came back to it. And I stopped trying to do this. This was too much. This was too hard. So I just worked on up close. And that was my way of leaning into the problem without actually diving into the middle of the fire. Okay, and we did months and months and months of this until he went, God, I love that. And then when I went out here, he went, well, it makes me a little nervous, but it's not too bad. And then it didn't trigger muscle spasms. Then it didn't upset him. Then it was manageable because we went to the problem beside it or the problem before it. And that's what it looks like to lean into the problem. I see there's a problem, but I'm going to do the small piece of it, not the big piece. So I hope that helps. Lots of comments here. I guess I'm not leaving after all. Kathy says, I missed the beginning about your trauma with Atlas. It's so wonderful that you allow us to see the vulnerable side of you, as often trainers hide it from the world, which doesn't help the rest of us trying to find a way forward with a difficult problem. Fortunately, I am emotionally responsible and haven't gotten too depressed about the fact that I am having to address the fact that when I offer up the halter, Willow moves her head away. The penny finally dropped when I figured out she was telling me our training was going too fast. Finally listened. Yes, that's it. You know, if you're having trouble, it's just too much too soon. And we either have to increase the motivator so that the horse is willing to try harder, or we have to decrease the challenge of what the thing is so that the horse is willing to take it one bite-sized piece at a time. Teza says, it's the thinking that acceptance is enough to move on. Sometimes more comfort is needed before moving on. Good, but frustrating sometimes. That's exactly it. We think, well, my horse isn't terribly bothered by this. I can move on to the next step. But the fact is, they need to really go, oh, I'm looking forward to that before the next step is going to be easy for them to chew. Sal says, I tend to freeze because I'm so worried about making mistakes and I end up doing nothing. I'll try and lean into it and be okay with making mistakes. Thank you. Yeah. You know, the thing that I would encourage you to do is if you know you're going to make a mistake, try and make a small mistake. And if it ends up being a big one, well, then try and figure out what the sister mistake to that is. How do we make it a smaller mistake? And we just keep making it smaller and smaller until it's not a mistake at all. It's just something we do. Yeah. Good to hear from you, Linda. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Rachel says, to me, leaning into it means just go with what's happening at the moment, figure out what went wrong and learning how to do better. Yeah, exactly. You know, you go with what happens. You just make the best of it and you go, okay, well, when I go to sleep tonight, my brain's going to process this and tomorrow I can come out and have a better plan of what I might do. A lot of times we need to just let our brain process overnight. Karen says, topic, protecting horses from unconscious, unknowing vet. 2-year-old was traumatized yesterday and I wish I'd stopped the vet sooner, sadly. This is one of those really tough things. You wish it had never happened. You wish that you had stopped before you got there. But I will tell you, the fact that it happened will cause you to think about this stuff so much more deeply. And you will become such a better horse person because of the experience. So lean into it. Let it teach you. It's not anything we would hope for or choose. But when it happens, let it be useful. Yeah. Laura says, thanks a lot, Elsa. So authentic. For me, leaning into it also means leaning into all of my bad feelings. They are okay. Yeah. Those bad feelings are the thing that becomes that fire, that fuel that feeds our desire to do better. And when we have a little bit more fuel to lean in and do better tomorrow, it gets better faster. I prefer learning without that extra fuel, but if it's there, use it. Thank you guys for joining me for tea time. I'm going to end it there, but I appreciate you talking to me about the topic and make use of those mistakes. They are valuable. And then we do better and we make fewer, maybe, if we're lucky.